Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody to our second annual UCI Iranian American Alumni Chapter. This is our annual meeting, and we also have a career panel here for you tonight. We're so delighted that you're joining us this evening. And first of all, like we said, some housekeeping items. Since the session is being recorded, we're going to be able to then put this out again on our Facebook page. If you haven't liked our Facebook and joined our community, please do so. We're going to be engaging with folks there, as well as the website and information that I'll share with you a little bit later. And but before we begin, I do want to take a brief moment just to acknowledge the gravity of our current times that we're navigating, the challenges that we all have faced on the onset of COVID-19, but also the racial and civil injustices. And, you know, we empathize with the pain, sadness, and anger that many of our Black students, friends, colleagues, and alumni are understandably feeling right now. We definitely stand in unity with our African American community to deepen everyone's understanding, to do our part as well as our community's part, so that we can actually make this world a better place, not just for today, but also for future generations to come. And, you know, true to our anteater community, to do this work and to make those strides, we must be in this together. And we just want to stand in solidarity with our community as the Iranian American Alumni Chapter with everything that's going on. So with that said, we'll try to didn't want to just brush off the gravity of what we are dealing with, but we are also trying to add light and hope and value this evening to our community. So I'll begin by introducing, or we will begin by introducing our board members, and I'm going to turn it over to our vice president momentarily, if we're able to get his camera working. And he's going to follow through with a quick chapter update to let you know what we've been up to, some accomplishments we've had for this last year. And then we're going to transition to our main event, which is hopefully going to be an informative discussion with our amazing alumni panelists who are going to share their journey, their wisdom and insights with our Anteater community. And so with that, I will turn it to Kian. Kian Mokhberi is our vice president, and I will turn my camera off, Shadi.
So Narajan, in technical difficulties, we had an issue with getting Kian on board. So if you don't mind reading the chapter update, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, no problem at all. Thank you for the heads up. I know that he had prepared some really great things. So if you don't mind actually going to the next slide, Shadi June. All right, so as you can see here, my name is Neda Moayedi. I serve as your president and humble servant for the evening and throughout the years. Kian Mokhberi is our vice president, and he is, he says, I'm on board, just no video. Would you like to speak your own portion yourself, Kian? I know you had prepared your session, but I don't mind if that doesn't work. Okay, no problem. And so, see, we're a team here. We like to make sure it's all good. So Kian serves as our vice president. We have Shahrzad Tajmiri. She is our fearless treasurer who goes above and beyond in so many ways. And as I talk, I could say wonderful things about every single person here. We're a fantastic team. Ramina Adelina is our communication chair. So when you see posts happening on Facebook and getting our word out on events, that's Ramina. Shadi Namiranian, I have to say, as our events chair, has been an incredible asset to our team. She has brought to life many of our events with her creativity, with her work ethic, with her diligence. I mean, she's just talented. I say everything she touches turns to gold. She's fantastic. Human Alaga is our mentorship chair, but he does so much more than that, right? So our mentorship chair is, we're trying to create an environment where we have an opportunity to give back to current students, undergraduate, graduate students, as well as our community as well. And there's opportunities for us to be able to serve as mentors, but some of us may need to be at a space where we are mentees. And so seeking that out, having that as an opportunity to build out our community in service and in growth, this is part of what makes our thread so strong. And Dr. Sudabe Weaver, also Susie is her nickname, she serves as our scholarship chair. And what we're hoping to do is raise funds with upcoming events. Actually, next Wednesday on June 24th is our annual Giving Day celebration, where we are going to raise funds for students in need, hopefully for scholarships. And so this is at the beginning stages, and we're hoping to really build that out in this upcoming year to be able to support our current students and not let financial burdens be in the way of their academic and personal and professional success. So that's actually, she has a very big hat to wear. But within this board, we have been together now. We launched in February of 2019. So we're almost at a year and a half old, and we've had many events that I know that Keon was going to share. We've done a lot of collaborative opportunities within working with our Latino chapter and Korean American chapter, but also our Orange County chapter, in just being able to put together meaningful, engaging environment for our community, right? Sometimes it's like this evening where it's career focused, other times it's social and just building our network, right? So we want to hear from you. How do you feel that this is going to be valuable to you? But we were really proud that in the onset of our first year, we received the most collaborative chapter award, which was a real point of pride for us, because we don't want to just serve Iranian American alumni. We want to serve everyone. And you don't even have to be Iranian American to join our chapter. If you appreciate the culture, if you resonate in any way with our culture, please do. There's no restriction in that whatsoever. I think we will also be, Shadi, just take a quick moment. I want to share that she received acceptance into law school, and she's going to be taking on some extra responsibilities. No big deal, just some law school. So Kim, by the way, law school. Anyways, just kidding. But she will be stepping back. She's still going to be involved, but no longer able to serve at her capacity on our board. So we're going to be making that announcement that position is available. So if anybody out there is interested in joining our board or volunteering their time, we'll go over some ways that you can engage with us and let us know you're interested. And I think that covers most of it. Yes, Shadi? Did I leave anything?
No, but I would like to comment that my favorite event we've done on campus was the UCI Homecoming. So for alumni out there, that if you can travel to campus, hopefully for next year or even the year after that, it's truly an amazing event to be a part of. That's it.
Yes. Well, and I'd like to just take a moment to truly thank our board, because none of this would be possible without the amazing team that we have. And we are excited for reaching for, big dreams and big goals in this coming year. So stay tuned and let us know what you would like to see from us, right? If we just do events for ourselves, that's not the point. It's really being able to provide programs and events that resonate for you. So please, we welcome your feedback, but a special shout out and thank you to this incredible board that I have the privilege of working with. So thank you. All right, so then we'll go ahead and transition. And I have the pleasure of, introducing our panelists. They are incredible individuals, personally, professionally, and they're joining us tonight, and we couldn't be more grateful. They're definitely esteemed and accomplished in their respective fields, and this is our opportunity to be able to welcome them and introduce them. So briefly, just bear with me a moment while I want to read their bios. And our speakers this evening are Dr. Niaz Kasravi and Pasha Arshadi. Dr. Niaz Kasravi is a national expert and advocate on criminal justice, social justice, and racial justice. She has more than 18 years of experience leading campaigns across the country, including police accountability, racial profiling, and death penalty abolition. Dr. Kasravi is the founder and director of Criminal Justice Program at the National Association for Advancement of Colored People, also known as NAACP, and associate for the Domestic Human Rights Program of Amnesty International USA. Dr. Kasravi holds a PhD in Criminology, Law and Society from UCI, and in 2000, via the National Science Foundation grant, she traveled to Iran to work with Nobel Peace Prize laureate Shirin Ebadi on women's rights and justice reform in that country. So welcome, Niaz June. So delighted to have you. And our second panelist is Pasha June. As VP of Global Service Solutions at Quest International, Pasha Arshadi is responsible for the company's overall global service strategy, device manufacturers, and companies leveraging IT infrastructure within their business. Mr. Arshadi's role includes identifying key organizations and vertical markets in which the company can leverage new technologies and services to enhance his clients' services and business on their core products and find more efficient ways of enhancing his clients' core operations and supply chain. Mr. Arshadi holds a Bachelor's of Science and Master's of Science in Computer Science and has developed a deep understanding of software systems and computing technology in his current and past roles. Welcome, Pasha June, and thank you both for joining us tonight. We've so been looking forward to this conversation, so I'd like to welcome you both. All right, and welcome, and both your cameras are on. Fantastic.
Hi.
Hi, welcome. How are you doing today?
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Well, that intro for Niaz was phenomenal, and like, given all the things that are happening, I'd like all the attention should go to her for this discussion here.
You know, it is timely, and I've had the privilege of seeing Niaz speak in several different settings, including the Irvine Town Hall earlier this year, and I'm captivated every time I hear her speak and hang on to every word she's saying. So couldn't agree more. But you, my dear, also have so much expertise, wealth of knowledge, and your own experiences. So please know that we are just as excited.
Thank you. I'll give some commentary when I can. Thank you.
So with that said, you know, we always like to start these introductions to be able to ask you if you could share a little bit about your time at UCI, like when you graduated, of course, if you want to share a little bit more about your degrees, and if any student organizations that you participated in during your time as a student at UCI. And you can decide, Niaz, you can go first and we can swap back and forth.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me to this event, and thank you for all the work that you do. I recognize it's a thankless job, and organizing these events and coordinating everything is a lot of work that you guys are doing in addition to your actual work. And so I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that, and I'm really excited to be on the panel with Pasha. I think it's just really important for us to not be stuck in our own field and really learn about what else is out there in different ways that we can partner and work together, even though it doesn't, you know, maybe traditionally or on face value doesn't make sense. I feel like, you know, everybody does their part in this moment. And so I'm happy to talk a little bit about my Irvine experience. I came to Irvine to do my undergrad, and I ended up staying for my graduate degree as well for a host of reasons, including the fact that I really fell in love with the Criminology, Law, and Society, or CLS program at UC Irvine. So I received my bachelor's in psychology and social behavior, and also in criminology and law and society in '96. And I stayed on to do my PhD and graduated in 2001. So that's sort of my background at UC Irvine. Did you want me to speak right now about my experience and my involvement and perhaps clubs and things like that I was involved in?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I found UC Irvine for me, it was a perfect fit, you know, especially because I found a lot of like-minded folks in my school. I was actually slated in my own head, really, sorry, I was having technical difficulties of my own here. In my own head, I really was slated to go into psychology and become a therapist, and all the psych courses were really popular. So in the first few years, I couldn't really get the courses that I wanted. So I'm a bit of a nerd, and I said, well, I might as well use this opportunity to get another degree and double major. And when I started taking criminology, law, and society courses, it really spoke to me in a different way. And I think it had a lot to do with some of the professors and mentors that I ended up having in that program. So I totally shifted gears to criminology, law and society. And I ended up staying because I wanted to work with some of the professors at UC Irvine and continue to learn from them. We can talk about that a little bit more. And then just in terms of my activities outside of being an academic and a nerd at UC Irvine for almost 10 years, you know, I got pulled in by an older student to become involved in the Iranian Cultural Club, as it was called back then. And before that, I was pretty reserved. And that really was one of the turning points in my life where I really became more social and started taking on more leadership roles. And then at some point in my junior year, I think I became the president of the UC Irvine Cultural Club. And it was really some of the best years of my life, really working in collaboration with the board and the community in Irvine, and you know, hosting some really amazing events through the years to highlight our culture and community and contributions both to UC Irvine and beyond. So really grateful for all of those experiences that UC Irvine offered.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. And Pasha June, same question for you.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Thank you, Niaz. I actually grew up down in Orange County. So I went to high school in Capistrano Valley High School in Mission Viejo. And I didn't have any desire to really go out of state or go beyond the bounds of Orange County. I really love this place. I'd grown up in the Valley in LA. And when we came to Orange County, it was such a pristine area that I just really never had a desire to go anywhere else. So naturally, I applied to the local campuses and decided UCI was, you know, the place that I wanted to go. And it's funny because I was kind of on the borderline as far as what major I wanted to initially do going out of high school. Initially, you know, the Persian thing is, you know, doctor, lawyer, right? So I was, you know, into the bio thing. I did AP chemistry, AP bio my senior year of high school, just, you know, through discussions with family and, you know, pushing me towards that realm. And, you know, it wasn't my thing. I didn't have a passion for it. And so I initially was kind of on the fence as far as what I wanted to do. So I kind of teetered between that, you know, then I teetered between econ. So this is all like your junior year as you're starting to apply for college. And these are very important decisions, and don't think when you apply that necessarily that's a final thing. So I did apply my application as an econ, and you know, after I did that and got accepted over the summer before freshman year, I don't know what happened. As a kid, I dabbled with computers and I always, you know, was into that type of stuff. My dad kind of pushed me and said, hey, why don't you go into computer science? And so, you know, I kind of thought about it a little bit over the summer, and I called the ICS school and I'm like, hey, how can I get in? They're like, they told me it was full. So I was a little concerned, and I didn't know the process to change majors. And so they said, don't worry, you know, you can change majors when you come on campus. You got to start taking classes, and then, you know, you can file for an official major change. So anyways, I kind of went through that whole process, and they scare the hell out of you when you go into some of these ICS classes. And I'll tell you guys the story as we start progressing down these discussions. But you know, I ended up doing ICS. I think Niaz was ICC, and when I had joined, all of my friends at my high school were American. I had one Iranian friend, and when I grew up, it was always like, you know, you don't want to talk Farsi, you don't want to really affiliate with your culture, especially growing up in Orange County. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't a lot of Iranians when I was growing up. So when I actually, my freshman year, I remember Niaz being in ICC, and I think she was coming out of being president, and I think Turaj Basti ended up taking that role, or it was Parastu actually, Izzat Sata that took the president role after Niaz. And I joined in and got connected with the club, and my passion towards the culture just grew immensely. And I started building a lot of Persian friends and started to go to all the events, and really just got, I mean, that really triggered things for me where I would want to speak Farsi more. And it was just interesting the change that it had in my being back then. And so I spent a lot of time, again, gravitating towards the people and the cultural events that we were having as far as ICC is concerned. And then I was obviously getting entrenched in all the studies for ICS, which was an interesting twist for me as well too. And I'll share those stories as we get through. So I was in ICS. I finished with that degree and then went on to do my master's at CS Fullerton. But it's funny because affiliation-wise, ICC was pretty much the only extracurricular thing that I had going on at UCI. I was so consumed with computer science and the amount of workload that it put on you that really there was no other time for anything else. But that was the one thing that I have fond memories of. A lot of friends, a lot of connections that were made from just joining that club. And then again, just looking back, I'm happy that I made the decision that I did, especially nowadays with tech being the way it is in this world and understanding how all that is put together. There's a lot that I've learned from that, and I'm glad I made that decision. So UCI was a wonderful school. I think back then when ICS was around, it was top 9 for undergrad. And I think they've just improved from there. So they're getting a lot of investment from the Samwalis and a lot of other different donors. And so I'd be happy to answer any other questions as we get further on down this panelist discussion as far as my experiences.
Absolutely. Thank you both for sharing.
Sure.
And I think it's so important to find that community. I mean, similar to you, Pasha, I feel like once I found this Iranian American Alumni chapter, building my community, I jokingly, Niaz has heard me say, it's like, I've never been so Iranian before, right? So there's this pride that you get to celebrate where you come from, and you're like, oh, I didn't have to explain myself. Someone else just gets me. But I think for students that are out there, or even alum that are looking for community of like-minded individuals, it's so beneficial to have that. So thank you for sharing. And I believe ICC is now Iranian Student Union is what it's evolved into, right? Yeah. So, and you both shared a little bit in terms of some of the ways that you weren't necessarily setting out on your path and how you got here. But were there any specific like life decisions that led you to your current career path? Like, how did you end up starting on that professional journey? And I know, Niaz, you wanted to stick around and do some research with our fabulous faculty, but was there an individual that might have inspired, or a class or an event for either of your scenarios early on?
Yeah, 100%. I think that, the career path I chose kind of evolved. You kind of heard the beginning where I thought I was going to do psychology, and I just got pulled into criminology. I think a lot of that, and I know this is something that might come up later, but I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that, I was an immigrant to this country, and we came from Iran, where I was both a woman and a religious minority. Which were sort of like two strikes against me in that regime in terms of not having equal rights and being subject to discrimination, right? Including everything we saw during the revolution and the war and things like that. So I think for me as an immigrant, when when you come to the US, you kind of have a very rosy vision of this country. And I think it has offered me a lot of opportunities that I'm grateful for. And I couldn't have done what I do anywhere else, right? But also I think when I started to learn about the criminal justice system, I was floored in terms of the systemic racism and inequality that existed within it and how it perpetuated existing inequalities from society, right? And I think that's not something I expected I would learn about the systems that governed this country. And so I think that was a turning point for me. It was sort of a personal journey to come to that, but I came to that realization because I took a course with Dr. Kitty Calavita, who is my mentor and ended up becoming my grad advisor. And she really explained these inequities within the system in a way that made you understand that even though equality is promised on the books, the law in action actually plays out differently than its intention, But she also taught us that there are people who advocate for and create these laws because it benefits them, and therefore it's possible to advocate and change laws that are unfair. And so we studied social movements, and we studied folks who were leaders in justice advocacy and civil rights and human rights. And I think that was really an inspiration for me, and it spoke to me. And so I think when it came time to decide, because, you get your PhD, and oftentimes in a lot of schools, it's changed a lot these days, but especially back then, and especially in Irvine, you are prepared to go into academia. And so, not that I don't like academia, and I may end up there somewhere down the line, at least part-time, because I do believe in the power of teaching and the power of, learning and mentoring the future generation, right? But I really wanted to get out there and get my feet wet and do advocacy work. And I think it was a result of how I was taught about these issues by my mentor and advisor in grad school that made me want to work in the advocacy space. And it wasn't, we can talk about that later, but it wasn't easy breaking into the advocacy space if you're trained to be an academic. But that's how I ended up doing what I do, is through that evolution and those kind of periods of learning and aha moments that I had throughout undergrad and grad school.
It's all about those aha moments, they really create pivots and different forks in the road. And it's interesting to look back on those aha moments. Thank you for sharing. Pasha Jun?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
So it was interesting for me. As I said earlier, I was looking initially to go into the econ world, and my dad actually kind of suggested, hey, you really need to look at tech and getting into computer science. That's going to be the future. And I kind of understood at that time. And back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, computers, AOL, dial-up, it was just starting to come about, right? So there wasn't really a huge tech infiltration. And again, I apologize, I might have some background noise here, by the way, a full house. So, when I initially started UCI, I had to take some ICS classes. And it was really interesting. And Niaz, I don't know if you had this experience with, you were obviously in a different major than I was. But the interesting thing was, you would go into these ICS classes back then, and I don't know if it's like that now. And the classes would essentially be full the first, few weeks before the first midterm. And the professors, the math professors and the computer science professors, first thing they tell you is, I want to let you guys all know, in the next 2 weeks, half of this class is going to be empty. And half of this class is going to essentially fail the first midterm. Straight out, right? So, and literally like the next day in class, 30% of the class was gone. So, and it was just a matter of persevering and really being dedicated to want to stick with it, because computer science is a different way of thinking. It's a logical way of thinking, but it's not natural, as you and I would probably think, not being exposed to it. So it was tough. I mean, when I first started, it took me a little bit to get used to it. And there were times where I wanted to quit, especially because there's such a heavy math involvement. And you're not talking about like algebra, you're talking about symbolic logic type math and linear algebra. I mean, it starts getting pretty complex, and it's just a different experience. And had I not had forces behind me to push me to stay and to persist, I could have seen myself giving up. So, one of the things that why I wanted to get involved with this group is to help some of the new grads that are getting involved with the university as they're navigating through these paths, and they don't know where they're going to go and what they may gravitate towards, is kind of giving them some insight into what I went through and what they need to be looking for down the road, as far as what is, from a career standpoint, what will help them. And so where technology goes, or where social justice, whatever it may be, right, is giving these undergrads and even grad students a little bit of insight into what to expect, what they should be looking for, and how they should prepare themselves so they don't give up. And again, I don't know everyone's personal situations, right? If they have parents here or they're abroad or whatever it may be, but as this group really, one of the intents was to create kind of mentorship and to give some level of guidance to people that want to get exposed to different majors or industries, and to help them make those decisions better. So if I hadn't had that in my own personal life, I don't know where I would have been. I could have been doing something else, but I'm glad that I had that, and it's molded my direction and helped me out. And hopefully through these sessions that we have through this group, and other things that we do, hopefully we can help others make those decisions as well too.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important. Thank you for sharing that, Pasha, because a lot of times, especially at UCI being such a competitive, rigorous school, you look to your left, you look to your right, and someone is doing it better, faster, and you
Sure.
feel like you're struggling. And so having that, I think it really helps to guide the way. So really appreciate it. And I think that's why tonight is so valuable to hear from both of you, because we're gonna be able to share this recording nice
Definitely,
and live. And so really appreciate that insight. You know, sometimes
Sure.
it's those tough experiences. You know, before we jump in, I do want to hear sort of the early career choices, but if you can share with our audience just your current roles and responsibilities in a typical day or week. I know most days probably aren't the same, but you can just give a little bit of insight into a peek into your world and roles and responsibilities. That would be fantastic.
Niaz, do you want me to take that one first, or do you want to? Oh, okay. So, yeah, thanks. She's muted.
I'm muted now, but yeah, go ahead. I'll go after.
So what we do, my company, we work with device manufacturers. We're big on the healthcare side. So we work with a lot of healthcare tech companies. And what we try to do is we do what's called service transformation for them. And so if you look at companies that are out there, like the Philipses of the world, the GEs, the Siemenses, they all have a service infrastructure they've built over the years to support the capital equipment that they deploy to support patients, if you think about it, right? Ultrasound, patient monitoring equipment, et cetera. And so one of the things that we do is we help them essentially consolidate the aspect of their service business. I'm sorry, 1 second, guys. Just turn the volume up here. We help them really rethink their service strategy to be more efficient, so that in terms of being able to leverage a global infrastructure to support their technology. So we basically support all of the servicing of their equipment as it comes back from the hospitals. And what that allows them to do is refocus their efforts on innovation and focusing on their customers, which are the hospitals and the providers. Just traditionally, because the devices in this space have been so proprietary, there's been a necessity for them to be able to support their own technology as they build it and deploy it out. And so what we're trying to do is really fill the gap of being able to provide that backline support for them, so they can really focus on, again, innovating and providing customer support. So from a day in, day out scenario, really it's being kind of a strategic thinker and letting them know what their options are. So I deal with executives at a lot of these larger healthcare institutions on a day-to-day basis. And what we do is try to explain to them the benefits that they can realize by leveraging our global infrastructure rather than building that infrastructure themselves. Because there's a lot of scale that we can bring and efficiency that we can bring because we're supporting multiple device manufacturers. And so really it's changing their way of thinking from what was around 20 years ago to what's available today. The same exists in the software space. Back when I was in computer science, you would have to write your own libraries of code. You'd have to write everything by yourself. And nowadays, my cousin, he's actually UCI grad. He graduated, I think, 6 years ago. And he's working as a software engineer at Uber. And he was telling me that, all of these libraries are pre-developed now, and they just make calls into the cloud, and they can essentially, without having to do all that work, they can leverage infrastructure that's already built for them. So they treat it like a utility. So things have changed from a tech standpoint. And what I do is I try to translate what I see in the software world and bring it out to kind of more the infrastructure world in terms of device manufacturers and how they, again, support their equipment.
Yeah, wow. And so important for this time right now, the work you do.
It is.
So
Yeah. And coincidentally, so we, one of our largest customers is Philips Healthcare. And, we got notice when this whole COVID thing broke out, because they are the market leader in terms of patient monitoring. And they also have a huge ventilator line. And so when this whole COVID thing broke out, they literally sent us like a letter, and they said to post it on the door because we were essential business and we're the only ones in North America supporting their product set. So because the demand was so high for these products and things were failing, they needed us to essentially keep our business running, full shift to be able to support all of the demand that they had with the hospitals requiring this type of equipment. So it was interesting to see how all that played out and us kind of being in the center of it. So it was a really good experience from that standpoint.
That's incredible. Thank you for doing the work you do.
See, your work is also very important in this moment.
That's true.
We face a lot of issues.
Yeah. The focus has shifted though from like last week to now this week with what's going on, but I agree.
And Niaz?
So a couple of years ago, I launched and I currently run a research and advocacy institute called the Avalon Institute for Applied Research. And we focus on doing research and advocacy around criminal justice issues and racial justice issues, as you mentioned. You know, I made that decision for many reasons. I think probably earlier in my career, I would not have launched off into my own thing because you just have to know yourself. I'm the kind of person who needed the experience and the understanding and the expertise and the structures that organizations offered before I felt like my feet were on the ground, where I can just, open up my own wings and fly. And I think I came to that realization that it was time because, I started to have this awareness that I didn't always agree with the way certain things were being approached, certain issues or certain projects were being approached by all the organizations I work for. They all, did fantastic stuff, but I wanted more freedom to be able to decide what are the different kinds of projects that I want to be involved in, and how do I want to be involved in it, and how do I want to do that work, right? So I wanted more freedom in that. And so it's a small company, and it's a small institute. A typical day or week involves anything from meeting with partner organizations, meeting with funders and foundations who I work with a lot and do strategic advising with them, managing research teams and researchers, writing and editing research projects and papers, fundraising for projects, and taking care of, some of the admin tasks. Because we're a small institute, all of that falls on a few of our shoulders, right? But all of that work focuses on campaigns and advocacy around criminal justice issues, particularly these days around policing, police accountability, and mass incarceration. So prison conditions, as well as re-entry for those who have, served their time and coming back home to our communities. So wear many different hats throughout the week, but started out with a lot more sort of structure where I just had a role as a researcher and a program officer or whatever. And now it's, I got to wear different hats and manage the Institute on several fronts.
That's incredible. You're not just wearing the hats, you're also carrying everything else alongside it as well. And I think you're such a great example for our PhD students who are often, thinking they're on an academic pathway versus a non-academic pathway. And it doesn't have to be either or, it can be and both. And you can utilize these skill sets you gain along the way. So I think you're a prime example of that. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of my work recently, in the last few years especially, but really throughout my career, I've benefited from being sort of brought up in the academic space. And there's often a divide between academia and advocacy. Yeah. And I feel like that divide is not always good or necessary. There may be some instances where you need to have some separation for research sake or whatever. But I feel like, especially in this field, all the research you're doing in academia has to be tied to what's happening in the community, has to be accessible, and has to be able to benefit the community and the issues that we're working on. So 100%, that's kind of the intersection at which I work.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you. And I think that's what UCI strives as one of our pillars, is to be able to be infused within the community, to give, to be able to elevate. So that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. And thank you both for giving some insight. I mean, I know it's not a full picture, but at least it gives us insight into a little piece of your world. Now, when you think of your early career choices that led you to where you are now, can you share a little bit what those choices were? How did you leverage your UCI education and network to boost your career? Was there, early on, how did you navigate?
I can go.
I wasn't sure if you wanted to go.
It doesn't matter.
You look like you were in thought. I just didn't want to disrupt that.
No. I was just, there could be so many answers, but I'll try to focus. I think that early on, I think I mentioned this a few minutes ago, is when I graduated, because the program back then was so focused on just academia that wanting to break into the advocacy space, I just wasn't prepared for it. I didn't have the connections. I didn't have the internships that I should have had, or other people who come to this space have. And so I had to start at sort of one level below where I wanted to be in terms of just putting myself out there. And it wasn't easy. You know, I just contacted everybody who I found, whose work I found interesting, all the organizations that I thought I would want to work for, and set up informational interviews with people who I thought would be great partners, or I could just learn from any advice that they had. Not that, I mean, if you have any openings, of course, but what's your advice to somebody like me who wants to get into this field? And, you know, there was different levels of receptiveness, right? But you kind of have to just bite the bullet and make those cold calls. And that's really what I did. And I got a lot of rejections, you know, in the beginning. And I remember at one point, just right here, out here on this stoop, I got one of my many rejection letters, and I just sat there and I held my head in my hands and I cried, because I was like, nobody wants to hire me. But, you know, things fell into place, and I ended up making a connection with the new head of the US programs at Amnesty International. And I went out there and I interviewed with him like his first week on the job. He didn't even have enough funding for a full-time position. He kind of created this hybrid position after I did some volunteer work for him, writing up a memo around what was happening in our community after the NCERS program. It was right after 9/11. So I sort of had to prove my value and put myself out there and take everyone has to make these decisions on their own, but I took a very, very low paying job across the country with a PhD to get my foot in the door at Amnesty. And if I had to do it over again, I 100% would, because for me, we should all be compensated for what we do and the skills we have. But I think often getting caught up in that transactional mindset, for me, has not always been the right approach, like off the bat. So that was my early experience. And then after Amnesty, you know, once you get your foot in the door and you prove yourself, then I was able to really rely on the quality of the education that I had received at UC Irvine to prove myself once I am in the position to do so.
Yeah, wow. It's really helpful to hear that, you know, your own journey, because there is a question that that's come through that says, for Niaz, what advice would you give to a recent grad who wants to work and become a social justice advocate? And I think you just nailed that. Are there other opportunities that they could look for aside from informational interviews and being resilient and facing that rejection that might come their way? Is there anything else that you would recommend for a recent grad?
I think, especially right now in this field, in the moment that we're in, there's never been so many opportunities and so many organizations to get involved with. So I would suggest, yes, put yourself out there, yes, volunteer, and really figure out what space you want to work in. It's okay to not know it off the bat. You can have some options and explore. But, you know, especially around criminal justice and policing issues, because those are such local issues and driven by local organizations, that there is so many places that you can go to and just learn from people, events that they do, just participate and listen. Mm-hmm. And right now, for better or worse, our events are all online. So it's somewhat easier to you don't have the travel time and whatever. But I would say get plugged into the different organizations that interest you. Sign up for their listservs, reach out to people who you think you can learn from, but really just absorb all the knowledge that's out there right now. This is a very rare moment. There's not I hope it lasts, right? But history has shown that a lot of people will forget. And these issues won't, and these organizations and this work won't be so much in the spotlight where it's easily accessible and easy to figure out, oh, who's doing what, who can I connect with, who can I work with. But right now, that information is out there. On Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you follow one person, 100 other similar people are suggested to you. And so I would just take advantage of all of that. The other advice I would give is don't get caught up in the moment for its own sake, right? Figure out why you're doing this. And this is sort of some of the problems I had with, I think in every, Pasha can probably say the same thing about the spaces he works in. I think you see some people get driven by ego and wanting to be in the spotlight and wanting to do nothing but social media advocacy and wanting to just hobnob and rub shoulders with, people who are getting a lot of attention and kind of be in the victory parade, right? And I think that's all good in time, but I think focusing on what the work actually requires beyond whatever attention or credit you might get for doing the work will be what sustains sort of your soul and your interest to remain, because those spotlights will fade, those people will change. But if you've been part of a campaign that really made some changes in the field you want to work in, that'll stay with you forever.
Yeah. Thank you. That's some priceless advice. And I hope for the person that asked the question, you got some and then more. So thank you. And then Pasha June, for you in terms of your early career choices that have led you to where you are in networking.
Yeah, sure. So actually UCI was really good about career paths. So when I was an undergrad in computer science, they would have fairs, I think every quarter, and a lot of the tech companies that were working back behind the campus were starting to build up those buildings, and they were coming about interviewing students. So got a lot of exposure there. So I had the opportunity actually to do some internship work at Cisco when I was, I think, in my junior year. That's a great resume company to have at that time. I think it was 99 or something like that. I mean, they were top of the market back then. And to have the privilege to work for them, to get exposure to their technology, which was in networking, was great. So UCI was really good about having these kind of career fairs and just giving you exposure. So it may have been a little bit different with Niaz Jan's major and how they were able to make those connections. But the ICS group was really good at that. Coincidentally, I ended up, my first job out of UCI ended up being for a company, a startup company, in which we did an upper division undergrad project for. So I think it was ICS 163 or something like that, project course where you go to a business. So the businesses will come to the campus and they want you to essentially develop a program for them. And so I ended up getting, for my project, getting exposed to a company right behind the campus. And the two founders were both UCI alums, PhD students from UCI, basically doing file share peer-to-peer type work back then, which was at its infancy, and just starting on e-commerce and all that stuff, building electronic wallets and credit cards. So I ended up getting exposed to them, and I got hired as a software engineer right out when I graduated, which was great. The pay was great. I did have the options, actually got hired by Microsoft and Capgemini to do consulting. But again, I didn't want to travel. I wasn't into being in the air 60, 70% of the time. I had plans to want to go get my master's. I didn't want to move to the Bay Area and deal with the expenses of working for Microsoft. And because I knew once I got caught up in that, then I wouldn't be able to go back, and it would be harder to go back and try to get started to go back to academia. So I thought it would be a smart move to stay local and to work, get a couple of years of experience, and then do my master's to at least have that. And interestingly enough, in my role, and I didn't know I was going to go down this path, I was hired as a software engineer. And most of the developers that worked with me were foreign. And so their English skills weren't that great. They were great developers, but they didn't have the interpersonal skills to be able to talk about the product or talk about the code in front of the customer. So I remember just kind of early on when I started doing development work, they kind of started sending me out to do all that stuff and accompanying the salespeople and the biz dev people to really kind of explain the architecture, the back-end application, how the software code worked, what we were doing. Even though I didn't develop the majority of it, I developed parts of it. They kind of had me be the front man on the tech side. So I started kind of getting pushed into this consultative role, just kind of organically. It wasn't something I had really seeked out, but it was something that, because but even when I was an undergrad, I was working at Circuit City as a salesperson. I was able to kind of marry those two skills of being able to talk to people and then talk tech and convey that into this one position. I really gravitated towards that. I really like explaining myself. I like talking technology. I like convincing people how tech is great. And so that was a great opportunity for me to kind of just get in a little bit of a different role and have interface points with customers and prospective buyers. And so it gave me a lot of exposure. So to answer the question, right, that's kind of the career path that I took to kind of get me started where I am, which is I'm kind of doing the same level of architectural work today from a service standpoint. But it just, I think those little paths that I ended up taking led me to where I am, and I'm very grateful for it because honestly, I love what I do. And getting my cousin's kind of still a software developer. He kind of has that knack to like to talk to people as well too. And I keep pushing him like, hey, you should start doing a different line of work, getting to develop business development type work, because having the skills to understand technology and then being able to then articulate that to an audience is very important. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do to make tech talk digestible by everybody. So I'm glad that I took that path.
Absolutely. I think to your point, being able to articulate the technical scientific things to a lay audience is a very desired skill and trait that folks are looking for. But I think too is you took advantage of all these different opportunities and showed up as your best self and did the work. It's not like things were handed down to you and you sort of stumbled. You did the hard work. Even speaking about the career fairs, they still do host them. And it's always, I work with students at UCI, so I'm always trying to get them to attend the career fairs and be intimidated. Did you find that you were able to go in with your resume and you felt prepared, or, was it an intimidating space for you?
The interviews were actually really intimidating. It's funny because my wife and we actually competed for the same internship at Cisco, and she still to this day, because I ended up getting the job and she didn't get it, she still gives me a hard time about it. And she's a genius. But from when you go into some of these interviews, they do ask you a lot of intimidating questions back then. And I still think they do it. They ask you a lot of kind of logical questions, riddles, they want to understand your thought process. And that, just kind of contrasting my experience too. So I did my undergrad ICS UCI, and I did my master's at Fullerton, and like completely different experiences. So the UCI method, it's a lot more theoretical, right? So they'll give you kind of the base foundation. They don't really give you the hands-on work. So it's good and it's bad. Like one is like, you have to figure things out on your own. They kind of throw you in the deep end and say, here's how you fish, go fish, right? Whereas when you kind of do the Cal State model, it's kind of like they actually hold your hand and they'll show you how to fish. They'll take in a couple with you and then they'll put you on your own. A little bit of a different style, but that methodology kind of pushes your thinking a little bit to think outside the box, which is great. I really encourage it. And I'm glad that I got exposed to that style of teaching and just kind of more the academic style versus kind of the hands-on work that you will traditionally experience. They're both just two different methods, right? One is not necessarily better than the other, but just when I'm able to contrast the two, I can kind of see where, the teaching style within UCI and teaching theory and allowing the students to then kind of figure things out on their own, just allows them to kind of go beyond maybe some of the boundaries they thought existed within their mind. So for that, I'm very thankful. And yeah, every day is a challenge. So it's just interesting to be able to take what you learned and apply that towards your everyday life.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And, when you're thinking about, you contributed, I want to share, I want you to talk about what's contributed most to your success. But I think before we go to success, I'd like to know from both of you, were there career mistakes that you made along the way that gave you some big lessons? And Niaz, we can start with you.
Yeah, I may be able to get two birds with one stone here, because I think probably my mistake, although I didn't know it was a mistake, you don't know before, stuff happens, also led to sort of a real turning point in my career, and something that really made my career kind of go to the next level, right? I think that there was, there was a point in my career where I had been doing this justice advocacy work around racism and discrimination for other organizations and other communities. And I really felt it, it got me in the gut. And I always wondered why the Iranian community wasn't in those spaces, right? It didn't take much, even before 9/11, I wasn't here during the revolution and the war and the hostage crisis, but we had experienced this as a community before. And it's not like it goes away, but this heightened period of targeting and discrimination kind of coincides with tug of war between Iran and the US, right? So especially after 9/11, doing this work, I was like, where are all the Iranians, where are we around these tables that are talking about working against racial profiling? Because we are being profiled at the airports through these policies like the Patriot Act and the NCERS, and there's no advocacy coming from our community. So I was really excited to work with the Iranian organizations to do that. And I got an opportunity to work with one of them. They actually recruited me to come and work with them to do some community organizing. And I was pumped, and it was an organization that was founded by a lot of really successful leaders in the Iranian American community. And I was super psyched to bring our community, to the fold around these issues. And, back then, I just had to learn a very hard lesson in that those organizations and the community as a whole, although there were pockets that they weren't ready.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you can't make people do the right thing if they don't want to, or if they choose to be ignorant, or if it's just taking them longer to catch on, right? So needless to say, it didn't go well. Mm-hmm. And I hit a very kind of low points in my sort of mental and emotional well-being and my understanding of a place in this world, because I was like, how could these brilliant people in our community not understand that these are real issues? And yes, it's important to do community empowerment and image building and blah, 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 to counter the negative stereotypes, but you also have to be in these advocacy spaces to push back against policies, the roots of which are the discrimination and everything that Black and Brown communities who have been here longer than us have dealt with.
Right.
That, it just wasn't the time. I think now I see a shift because there's so much awareness in our community, and it's probably generational too. Mm-hmm. But that was a very low point, and I learned that lesson the hard way. But once I came out of that, immediately, it didn't even, I think they might have even overlapped when that was happening and it was going down. I got recruited by the NAACP to do criminal justice work again, focusing on policing issues to begin with, and then worked on the death penalty campaign, which was successful in repealing the death penalty in Maryland, and did a lot of great work around, stopping police violence and stop and frisk abuses in New York City. So that sort of, I wouldn't call it a failure, but miscalculation or misjudgment on my part was followed immediately, almost as a result, because I was still in touch with that space. And I was like, yeah, this is not working out. I was like, okay, great. We need you. They don't want it. We want it. So that kind of, that jump to the NAACP, I mean, took my career to a different level where I got the opportunity to work with the oldest civil rights organization in the country and be a part of these amazing campaigns, which really built my experience and expertise and took my work to a next level. So it both was sort of a mistake and miscalculation on my part, but also sometimes your worst mistakes and your lowest moments will lead to the best things that have ever happened to you and the highest highs that you will feel, right?
Very true.
Did you just quote Nixon? I think
I
you
don't
just
know.
quoted Nixon.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
Did you say that? Are you being
Didn't know Niaz was a hardcore Republican.
No.
She's got it all covered. Don't you worry. And I think people are so fearful of mistakes and failure. So they, sometimes we don't realize it until we look back to say, actually, you know what, that mistake, that failure, or however you want to define it, puts you onto the path that you're on today. But in the moment, it doesn't feel good, right? So, but being able to have that awareness and reflection is really important. But yeah, what about you, Pasha June? Was there, a career mistake that led to your biggest lesson?
Yeah.
Or, then thinking about what contributed to your success?
Yeah, I have a different viewpoint. I don't believe in mistakes. I think that things happen for a reason. And I think you go down that path. And those lessons that you learn, whether you want to call them mistakes or not, or lessons learned, they're improvement. They basically help you improve, right? So the same analogy of your muscle has to rip to get stronger, right? It has to tear and break down. You have to be exposed in some cases to these, and everyone makes mistakes, or if you want to call it that. But I mean, I look back and I don't know. How can I say? I don't know what would have happened if I would have done something different. So I can't judge and say that if I would have done this, things would be, I could have taken a job with Microsoft. What would that have meant? I may not have married my wife, and I may not have these 3 amazing kids. I may have, I may be miserable in San Francisco, stuck in an apartment with coronavirus. I don't know what that would have led to, right? So I think we all go down a certain path, down a river, and there are going to be, there's going to be boulders and stones, and there's going to be challenges that we face. And I think that just helps us navigate down a stronger path and become the person who you're meant to be. I have a little bit more of a fate mentality when it comes to this stuff. So I don't know, it's kind of hard to answer that question. But that's my thought. I think every time you do think you make a mistake, it's an opportunity to grow stronger and learn from it. But you have to take the time to be able to really understand what you did and what you could have done better. And adding that extra amount of time to think about that will make you a better person, a stronger person, and will hopefully impact the level of success, however you want to define success. It'll define that for you. So.
No, that's fantastic. And knowing that that's been your process, Pasha, are you intentional about that? Is it something that, like, how do you put that into practice per se? Like, is it
I say, har chi khoda bekhad. That's what I say.
Okay, that works. Yeah, what's meant to be is meant to be.
Yeah.
I like to say, like, you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing.
Some things that have happened, and I can't explain, like, what the probability of some things are. And so I just stop questioning it. I just say, you know what, I'm going down a path, and maybe the path is there, and there's different choices I can take. Ultimately, it'll lead to this end result. Nobody knows what it is, right? And so you shouldn't second guess. You shouldn't dwell. I don't think anybody should dwell on their past. If you want to call it a mistake or the wrong decision, it's a learning experience, and that's the door that you took. But you can keep taking new doors to get to the right path again, right? So that's a really difficult question to answer, because I don't think any one of us would know what the outcome or what our lives would be like if we had done something different, right?
Definitely. No, and thank you for that.
Sure.
And, in our Q&A, Niaz, I see you saw it, but, the comment was that you're hitting the nail on the head, straight true and down with the cause. And he wished he had a fist emoji right here, but, sorry, our Q&A is limited. We can't have too many reactions in there, right? But I think it's so important to hear both your perspectives. And, you've shared some of the challenges along the way and how you've overcome them. Are there ways that your Iranian American identity has shown up in your work? I know, Niaz, you've alluded to it a little bit, and but if it can go a little bit deeper in terms of were there challenges, were there perks to sometimes being Iranian American, and how did you find your community outside of UCI?
My Iranian American community outside of UCI, or in general?
Well, first your identity and then thinking about your community.
So I think the identity piece definitely has to do with my experience, both, as I mentioned, in Iran, during the revolution and the war, and being a woman, and being a religious minority, and being totally fearful of all these guards that were sort of the morality police that were, and I was, I left when we were nine and a half, when I was 9.5. But I still remember how fearful we were when they pulled us over and they, I don't know, said my mom's sleeves were, not long enough. And then you heard of your friends being caught and flogged. And there was a fear instilled in us, right? That I think drives sort of my outrage at law enforcement injustices here in this country.
Right.
And so I think that experience made me be able to more easily see and recognize discrimination here and probably be outraged by it more so, because I think in the US, it's veiled in this, everyone's equal, everyone has an opportunity for success, and everyone gets justice all the time. But in other places, that's not the case. I think at the very least, they're like, no, you're not equal. And so I think to come to a space where I thought I was equal and then to find out there's all this stuff that's, really unjust, really drove me to do what I do. I think that, I grew up in a Zoroastrian household, and I hold the philosophy very dear. And I think those principles of, using your own good mind to choose good over evil, and, good thoughts, good words, good deeds were instilled in us from an early age. And so I think that has a lot to do with the work I've chosen. And so I think that those are some of the ways in which my identity has really shown through the values around which, my work is rooted, in which my work is rooted. So I don't know if you'd call them perks, but I think they are. Yeah. Good and bad and everything, right? How did I find my Iranian or my community outside of UC Irvine? I think it's just really important to know who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. And if you surround yourself with people who are like-minded and who you admire and who you can learn from and who you want to see succeed, you'll end up with the right group around you. I think that once I left UC Irvine, I think I was hurt a little bit by my experience in the Iranian community when there was such a disconnect between what I knew was the right thing for us to do, and we're doing a lot of it now, but it just wasn't the right time. So I actually, when I started working for the NAACP, I still was around, but I cut, I wasn't around as much. I only hung out with my close friends. I didn't particularly go into these big spaces. And, not until several years ago, when I was talking to a friend, and he really believes, and I'm glad, I agree with him. I just sort of needed to distance myself a bit and just focus on work and get over my anger. But, he and I started talking about the importance of doing work in your own community, and especially now when you see the events unfold in this country and across the globe, and you recognize that each of our communities is responsible to work on our own issues, right? Work on the racism and the bigoted mentality and the different ways that our community can and has to do better, that's on us. That's not on outside actors to come and be like, let me teach you not to harm my people, right? So that's our work and that's our burden, no matter how difficult it is sometimes. So I think those were some of the challenges, but I found my way back through people really encouraging me and making me realize how important it is, despite the fact that it's sometimes challenging.
Right.
I don't know if that fully answers your question or if it was
a
bit more broad, but.
And I think that's it, is there's no right or wrong answer, right? I think it's just being able to navigate. And I think if someone hears you share that, it might resonate in terms of they might be in that moment right now looking around being like, who is this? Who are these people? You know what I mean? But how do I find my community to do that work? But I think earlier when, you had shared your Zoroastrian beliefs, that's how you're north. That's what is guiding your values, is the good thoughts, good words, good deeds, right? So I think that's fantastic to have that as your guiding star, right? And Pasha Jun, what about you?
What about me?
Yeah, thinking about your Iranian American identity, how's that shown up? Were there difficulties and perks in your field?
No perks. I haven't been exposed. Not a lot of quid pro quo in my field there. So Sunshine Act, but no. In all honesty, I echo Niaz's comments. So I think culturally Iranians have the good thoughts, good words, good deeds taught to them at a young age. Like just generally, right? If you look at the culture, like just the way we are with each other. And again, right, I'm not going to, for the majority, I think Iranian people are really good. When you watch a lot of these programs where people go to Iran, you see how friendly Iranians are, inviting strangers into their house, taking care of them. That's just culturally who we are, right? So I think from that standpoint and kind of having that taught to me through my parents, I think that courteousness and that respect of others has helped me. I've had people that have been very terse with me, and I've held steadfast, and I've never let that bother me. And people have come back later and said, they're having a bad day, right? But I didn't let it bother me in any way to snap out or lash out at them for talking to me a certain way. So I think ultimately, yeah, I think that's in all of us. It's something that inherently we've been learned, and it's helped me a lot, right? Just in being able to talk to people and have an open mind and an open viewpoint, and not to discriminate in any way, right? So I take that for what it's worth and have used it with me. Again, but not just knowing another fellow Iranian has not necessarily helped me in any way. So I don't, aside from that, I don't really have anything else that's helped me from that standpoint.
Sure. Yeah, no, but it's still, thank you for sharing your experience. And to your point, you're right. Like as a people, we are very open and welcoming, and that is part of our ingrained culture. So thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
So there's a question here that says, you've both accomplished so much, and you're both incredibly successful within your own respective fields. Are there any new goals on the horizon? Niaz,
I would love to retire and do philanthropic work.
Okay.
But I gotta figure out how to put these kids through college first. That's my next goal, is to try to help people that are trying to get involved in industry, established. I mean, I'd love to be like a mentor and try to help people out to get where they need to go or give guidance.
Right.
I mean, I've been so blessed to have the life that I do and to have everything that I do. And if I can give back in any way, I mean, I would be honored to do so. So I don't know if I can quantitate that in terms of a goal, but that's ultimately what I want to do at some point when I'm not working full time, because unfortunately, time can be limited between my kids and my job and what I do. So that ultimately, when these kids are a little older and I can do that and help give guidance towards others, I would love to. That's my ultimate goal, is to do that.
Well, it might not be tangible today, but we are here to support you on your journey. So however we can support you, you let us know.
Definitely.
There's actually a question that's directed to you before we turn to you, Niaz, for your goals and your horizon. It's saying, Pasha, what do you recommend people study now if they're interested in technology?
Oh, that's a really good question. So obviously, you know, I don't even know what the majors are like within the UC system, but computer science, you know, computer engineering, I think software is the future. Everything is, you know, especially with all the stuff that's happening with coronavirus, you're seeing a huge shift into the cloud, and you're seeing a big adoption in tech in terms of automating things and leveraging technology. I mean, I just read an article yesterday that Amazon is giving its employees on their phone an app that tells them when they're getting close to 6 feet within each other to help them, you know, minimize exposure. So all this stuff is tech related. So sometimes I wonder if tech can cause more harm than good. But I think it just ultimately depends on how we end up, you know, deploying it. But ultimately, that computer science, I think software engineering is going to be the future, and that's really where people should focus their efforts. You know, when you look at picking a major, you have to look at what is your passion, right? You shouldn't get into something just for the money, because then you'll be miserable and you'll end up doing something that you don't want to do anyways. And then two is, once you find something that you can gravitate towards, is, you know, how can you make a living off of this? And it may not come at first, but over time, if you have a true love for it, you'll find a way to do what you love and also to be able to make a living off of it. So that's kind of a two-pronged answer there to the question that was there. But to answer the original question, yeah, I mean, I think anything computer engineering, computer science related, you know, anything in the tech space, you know, is fair game at this point.
I think that's great advice, Pasha. Great advice. All right, Niaz June.
What was the question? Future goals?
Yes, in terms of, you know, you're so impressive with everything you've accomplished, but are there any new goals on the horizon?
Well, my newest future goal is to sometime in the future help Pasha direct some of his philanthropic earnings for the right causes.
Say that.
Maybe that was the wrong choice of words. How about I donate some time? How about that?
Especially back now. It's on recording. You're done. We're coming.
Budget philanthropy. How about that? Let me put it out.
We'll take what we can get. But I think, you know, the Institute is still relatively new. So I would like to see it expand and find a home perhaps on a university campus where, the goal of an institute is to really train future minds and plug current students and researchers into what's happening, at least in my mind, in the community. So how do we train the next generation of ethical, integral researchers on university campuses who can use their mind and passion to actually move forward justice issues? So I would love to see the Institute grow in that way. But that also involves, finding some funding sources and partnerships within universities and identifying projects and teachers and departments, which, not hard to do, but it's got to be planned out, and it'll take a little bit of work. And I haven't made enough time to write in my life, and I know our vice president here, Keon, and I have had a conversation about this, and he's like, well, you got to figure out why you want to write. And I think he's right, but there is a need in me to do more writing, whether it's like articles or book or something that I just have ignored for a while. And so I'd love to just have some time to sit and think and just do some expressive writing like that.
I think we would love for you to have that time. So you've already been such a positive change agent and a voice of clarity in these dark times. I think I would say find some time, do some writing. Okay. But there is a question for you, Niaz. It says, how can people interested in social advocacy create income to allow them to continue social advocates create income to allow them to continue social advocacy work when they are starting out? Any advice that aligns with your field?
So first and foremost, the advocacy space and kind of like the do-gooder space, or whatever you want to call it, it's not as if there's no money in it, especially now. This is an amazing moment in history where literally millions and perhaps billions of dollars, if you count all the foundation dollars that are going to be shifted into the space as a response to what we've seen over the last few months. So it is ripe with funding, especially now. When you start out, you may not be, and some people get lucky, right? Some people land a job at a really well-funded organization or foundation at an entry level that, you know, is a decent salary. But when you start out, it might not be what your salary would be if you're a lawyer, doctor, engineer, whatever, you know, the typical things. But it is possible to get a decent entry level position, depends on what your needs are too, right? But it is possible to get a job and make a decent salary and then grow within the space. It's different than business, but it's not that different than business in terms of potential for growth and earnings. Proportionally, it might be less, but I think at the end of the day, there's opportunities to make a great living in this space. I think for the most part, it only works though if money isn't your first objective in life, you know? And I think that, and you have to be honest with yourself about what's important to you. Some people, I know some people, I have some friends who that's, you know, that's their passion. They love wealth. You know, I can't relate, but I also am not advocating that we live on a shoestring budget. It's definitely possible to find your way. And I'm happy if anybody wants to reach out to me and is interested to explore further how to make inroads, please put them in touch.
Will do.
Niaz is hiring.
Niaz is, you're both hiring, done. We're gonna put this call out, right? No, it's really, the way you both offer so much of yourselves, not just in the work and advice and wisdom that you share, but even just even offering that's really incredible and shows your heart and passion as well. So I'm so glad you're both doing the work that you're doing because it makes this world a better place, that's for sure. And, you know, I'm so excited. I could keep talking to you guys all night long. But in the interest of time, I want to also just see if you have that last nugget, the piece of advice, you know, those, and I know like most panels end that way, and maybe it's not even advice, maybe it's something you wish you knew for the audience and those that we're going to be sharing this recording with after, knowing that your impact will be far greater reach than just this evening. Are there insights and any last minute advice you would give in this unusually challenging, difficult times?
Sure, I'll go. I don't know if that look was go ahead or
there was a nod of you can go.
I would say a couple of things. I would say, number one, I wouldn't be too concerned about what people think or say about what you do. Sometimes we get caught up in that. And I swear to you, even though after probably the last 2 months, even my closest friends now understand what I do better, there are plenty of people in my family and my friends network who don't fully understand what I do, and I'm okay with it.
You're right.
You know, so it should be, Pasha said this, and your work and your career should be gratifying to you and you alone, and you have to understand why you're doing it. I think the other thing I'll say before I pause and pass it on to Pasha is that sometimes, and I fall into that category, I have to know and feel super confident about something I'm approaching and be an expert above and beyond before I throw my name, you know, in the hat for a job or a project or take something on, right? And that's sometimes causes a hesitation, which I feel like it's better to not have that hesitation. It's good to be cautious, But I think Michelle Obama said this in one of the talks she gave around her book tour. And she said something like, I've been in rooms and meetings with the world's, foremost leaders in business and foundations and philanthropic and politics. And I'm telling you, I don't know exactly what her words were, but it came across that as, they're not that smart. So, and that's not to like put down every world leader in every field, but I think sometimes we think that what it requires to get there is something outside of us.
Right.
And we
That's
don't,
very true.
And we don't see that the person who got there started just where we were. They just kind of took the steps to get where they are. And so kind of thinking about that perspective and not letting that initial fear and hesitation of, am I good enough? Do I know enough? Stop you from taking the next step.
Yeah. That's very insightful, Niaz. I think that having that growth mindset, I often say like life would be so much easier if we could see ourselves through other people's eyes without all the criticism we give ourselves and the way we hold ourselves back. So that's wonderful advice. Thank you. And feel free to add on after Pasha goes too, but yeah. Pasha.
Oh, I'm going now. It's my turn, right? So yeah, I think, people that are graduating, this is a very interesting time. I agree with you 100%. Everything's changing. Like if you look at it on a day-to-day basis, there are a lot of volatility. I mean, yesterday you weren't required to wear masks and today you're required to wear masks again, right? So, but anybody that's graduating and that's finishing up their collegiate education should be mindful that this is, and I'm looking at it from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Look at the challenges that are there, right? And then find a solution to that. And if you're passionate about it, follow that, right? Because everyone's talking about the new normal, and not only just from a coronavirus, but from social injustice to things that are happening. I saw an app that was launched yesterday about telling Siri to, I just got pulled over, and it starts recording you. I mean, so people, there's a lot of creativity coming about right now. And even in the healthcare space, they said, things have been stagnant for the last 20 years when you look at development, because people got complacent. There was so much bureaucracy and regulation. And if you notice, when coronavirus hit, the FDA laxed their rules because it was all about how can we bring things to market to help the issues that are about. So really my advice is keep your eyes open, be aware, and look for challenges that exist and try to develop solutions to those challenges. And that potentially can help be a business opportunity for you, whether it's tech related or not. There's so much, when these changes happen, they happen every 10, 20 years within our society. These are where new ideas are born, new businesses are born. And this could be the start of something, very big in terms of being able to come up with ideas to solve some of the challenges that exist in today's landscape and potentially tomorrow's. So with all the things that are coming about, what I would say is just to keep your eyes open and look for solutions to the problems that are out there right now.
That's fantastic. And I think that's the thing, right? So many folks are looking around because they think someone else has the answer. And now is the time to be creative. Now is the time to be innovative, be brave, look at the problems of today dead on and see if we can come up with some new innovative ways to tackle some of these.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think both of you have, paved the way for so many. And yes, you've got many new things on the horizon, but you inspire us, you inspire me personally. It's a real privilege to know both of you and get to have this evening together where you share your insights and your pathways. I think has not been a linear path for either of you, and the way that you've navigated your journeys has been something that our audience, and when we share the recording, they will benefit from this conversation. I have no doubt about that. So thank you both.
Sure.
And, you know, wow, the time flies. Time really does fly. So if there, you know, I want you to imagine a roaring applause from the audience. And, you know, I like to do the American Sign Language. I've learned that for the applause. But truly, thank you both for just taking time out of your busy schedules. I know you've had long days today and your lives are busy, but just to be here with us tonight, like I said, you're a true inspiration, and we really appreciate you and all your support that you do for us. So thank you.
Oh, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Yes, June.
Thank you, all of you, for everything that you do. And a shout out also to Elsa, who supports us all the time and pulling together all the logistics and just whatever we need. She's there. So I just
always there.
Do a shout out.
Elsa Bugarini Yoka is with the Alumni Association, for those that don't know, and she is our chapter liaison and so much more. I'm proud to be able to call her my colleague. She's the reason I ended up doing this. I made eye contact with Niaz and Elsa by accident, and that's how I ended up in this role. But no, she's truly a big heart, an angel that watches over us, so she really makes all of this possible. So you're actually getting a lot of thank yous in this in the chat coming through, just Elsa as well as both of you for this wonderful session. So much love. There's so much love coming through in the chat.
There is. And
can we get a Bob Marley song on right now?
No, but I want to thank you, Nada, and the entire board. I mean, Pasha and I, we with Sama and a few other folks, you know, we helped, you all were there, you know, we helped launch this chapter, and then we kind of had to get back to life, and you guys brought it to life. So
yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's really wonderful to see.
We're having a blast. No, thank you for your guidance. And like I said earlier, when we were introducing the board, it's really an incredible, special group of people. Everybody brings their expertise to the table, and we just appreciate having both of you as advisors along with Saman and Ramin. So it's been a fun journey, and we're looking forward to seeing where this goes long after I'm no longer the president, and we just set a strong foundation for this to really be sustainable for future communities. So.
I think we set up an autocracy for you to run this thing that till it burns to the ground.
I didn't hear you. You cut out. I'm so sorry. No, but just really thank you both so much. And I wish I could hug you all, you know, but thank you again. And we'll look to the evening for everybody that attended as well. Like, this wouldn't be possible if folks didn't have interest. And I know that some folks had registered but had childcare and dinner issues, and like, please send us the video. So we have a long registration list to also send it to. But we really hope that this was meaningful and an informative evening for everyone. But please be safe out there, especially during these uncertain times. And we're continuing to build our community. So please stay tuned by signing up for our mailing list. You know, you're going to see a lot more activity from us. There's been these wonderful, hosted by the alumni chapters, Wellness Wednesdays, and that's been, each chapter has had an opportunity to put forth a program. You know, our personal Iranian American chapter has had 2 sessions. I personally did career strategies in these uncertain times. Keon, our vice president, did strengths to navigate crises in this time. So there's many more. I know through June, we've been doing them every week, and then going into the future, they're not going to be quite as often, but at least perhaps they'll continue on. But check out what's going on with your alumni groups, right? We want you to stay connected to us. If you'd like to get involved with our chapter, the Iranian American chapter, you've got our Facebook there. I encourage you to please like and follow us. And feel free to email us and get in touch at info@uciiranian.org. We are working on our website to launch more information there for you. But we're always looking for passionate volunteers to join our board and help us grow this chapter. So we've got big things going on. And you'll notice the code there, the barcode for the survey. Please take a moment and complete the survey for us and let us know what kind of programming you're interested in, what you'd want to be involved in. We are open. There are no suggestions that will be shunned in any way. We want to hear from you so that we can plan out this next coming year very intentionally with you, our community in mind, right? And both Niaz and Pasha had shared, their willingness to be open and have folks reach out. I do want to plug the platform. It's Anteater Network. It's AntNet. And I will make sure that goes in the thank you email that you'll be receiving with the recording. But that's where you can seek out mentors. You can actually sign up and serve to be a mentor. So it's a really great way for our Anteater community to support each other. And also, with all the transitions we've had for, COVID and everything's gone virtual and remote. There's a wonderful website that the Alumni Association has put together, and it's Anteaters Go Virtual. And it's a wonderful hub of relevant updates, relevant events. So it's sort of like your one-stop shop to get caught up with all things UCI related. So be sure to check that out as well. And then one final plug, we mentioned early on that Giving Day is coming up. And that is our opportunity to engage with our alumni. It's not always the amount of money we raise, but how many people we also engage. So if you can give $5, $10 or more, please keep in mind that we are trying to raise funds for scholarships for our UCI students. And any donation, Pasha's going to start his philanthropy goals here right now. And just be on the lookout, because you'll get the email next Wednesday. It's all day. Share on social media. We look forward to drumming up some of that excitement. So I'm just going to check and make sure there's no more questions or chats. And I think we can wrap it up, and we're even a little bit ahead of schedule. So that's wonderful. Oh, Keon, our vice president, look at him. He threw it in the chat. So you can link directly to our Facebook from here and give us a like so that you can stay tuned. And again, any one of us, you can reach out to Elsa, myself, the info email that you see on your screen. Definitely be in touch. But thank you. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. And thank you again for being here with us tonight.
Thanks for being such a great host, Niaz John.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right, guys. Everybody have a great night. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Take good care. Bye.
Bye.